Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I didn't do a video on Saturday because I ran out of time. I was doing a bunch of research for yet another video on the topic of purgatory. I talked to the priest that's catechizing me about my dilemmas over it, and that was kind of helpful, even though it somewhat distracted us from probably getting a little bit further than we could have in that one class, but I think it was an important discussion. So today I'm going to be talking about uh, Pope Francis, a tweet that Pope Francis put out. Don't worry, this isn't a criticism of Pope Francis type video. I don't think I have the place to really do that. Um, I'm not quite knowledgeable enough about that sort of stuff, so it's definitely not one of those videos. I just wanted to talk about his one tweet here. Before I get into that, though, however, I just want to show you this rosary that a viewer sent me. It's very beautiful. A man named, I believe his name is Michael. I'm going off the top of my head here. So yeah, it has a pardon crucifix on it, and then a miraculous medal as well on it. And so he sent me that along with a few other things. He sent me 2 books and sent me another miraculous medal there. So yes, thank you, Michael. I already sent him a message thanking him because I just got that in the mail, and he sent me along with that a few other things. Um, you know, he reached out to me on social media. We ended up talking, and he wanted to send me a rosary, and so I gave him my mailing address, and he sent me one. So I just really want to thank him for that. That's very kind and sweet. There's been many people who've been very, very kind to me. So I just want to thank everyone for their kind words and everything like that. Okay, so let's get into it here. So Pope Francis put out a tweet 13 hours ago as of now. So it was today, September 16th. Yeah, and it says this: climate restoration is of the utmost importance for the Earth's future. Thus, I invite all nations to adopt more ambitious national targets to reduce emissions. And then he has the hashtag season of creation. I'm not sure what that hashtag's all about, but so I actually replied to his tweet because I agree with him in spirit for sure, that we do need to be better stewards of the environment, better stewards of the earth. But there's something I would add to this, which is that, and again, this is in no way criticizing Pope Francis, our Holy Father, Supreme Pontiff. What I would add to that, and what I did add to that, is that the really big problem, so the environmental destruction is a symptom of the greater disease. And the greater disease is actually that, I believe, of consumerism. And I have quite a bit of evidence to support this. So now, what is consumerism, right? Because we hear this term thrown around quite a bit. And without really people just say, oh yeah, consumerism. Well, consumerism would be like this idea. This is my definition. So the way I'm defining it here is that consumerism is like this idea that we need to, sorry, this is bothering me. We need to have an economy based off of demand, right? Instead of an economy that's supplying goods that are needed. And so it's, let's drive up demand, and that will drive up economic output, right? So it's like we want the biggest economy we can have in order that we can, the people at the top can make a lot of money. That's kind of the way a consumeristic economy works, right? And instead of having the economy based off of and focused towards supplying people's needs and maybe some luxuries as well. I think luxuries aren't an evil in and of themselves. But providing people's needs and luxuries, it's one that's based off of, sorry, a few luxuries. It's one that's based off of getting people to a state where they need to make as much money as they possibly can so they can acquire as much stuff as they possibly can, right? And this is what I believe is causing the environmental destruction. And it's causing, a lot more problems than that. So one criticism of this position would be like, oh, well, people are just naturally greedy and everything like that, so we're never going to get rid of that. And it's like, well, no, I mean, there's a difference here. So the way in which people drive up the amount of demand in the economy, one way in which they do it is through advertising, right? So advertising, if you're not familiar with it, well, everyone's familiar with advertising, but if you're not familiar with exactly what advertising is, it's what it should be is letting people know that you have a product available. So I could put an ad, let's say in the paper, if people still do that. Everything's online nowadays, but I could put an ad on Kijiji or something like that, selling something, right? Now, when I put this ad out, I'm like, hey, I have let's say a quad for sale, and it has these specifications and everything like that. It might have a few pictures of my quad. And then somebody will come across that who's looking for a quad and go, oh, okay, that's great. I'm going to buy your quad, right? Now, what advertising is in this day and age, in this environment, in this economy, and when I say this economy, I'm referring to, let's say, the Western world. I'm referring to the West, right? I'm not exactly sure how it works in other parts of the world, but I know how it works here, specifically North America. Okay, so what advertising is here is that it is used as emotional manipulation. Okay, so the last thing that these companies that are advertising really want you to do is to purchase purchase products rationally. They don't want you using your rationality when making financial decisions. Now, why is that? Well, they don't want you making rational decisions because if you made rational decisions, you probably wouldn't be buying a lot of their products, right? You'd be spending a lot less. Okay, and so the way they do this in advertising is through emotional manipulation, emotional and psychological manipulation. They don't come out and say, oh, hey, here's all of the specs for a product, buy it, in 30 seconds listing the specs for their products. No, instead they have like this story that goes on, let's say you're Coca-Cola, you have polar bears in your ads, and it's really nice and friendly, and people get like an emotional attachment to a product, right? To a product, instead of making decisions rationally. And this is really what a lot of our culture is based around, is this emotionalism. And so, of course, when you have that going on, people are going to be consuming a lot more than they actually need to consume or wouldn't naturally consume. I mean, think about it this way. Let's say we take a product like Coca-Cola and we look at it and look at how much sugar is in a can of Coke, right? There's a lot of sugar in a can of Coke. There's way more sugar actually in a can of Coke than they actually need in a can of Coke. Honestly, try this out. Like if you don't drink a lot of pop, try buying, let's say, like a liter of club soda. Okay, so just like carbonated water. Now mix a can of Coke with that liter of carbonated water, and you'll realize that that's actually enough flavor in that drink. There's enough flavor and enough sugar in that, what would it be, a can of Coke plus a liter. So so that one can of Coke has enough sugar for like 3 or 4 times the amount of volume, right? Enough sugar and enough flavor for 3 or 4 times the amount of volume. Okay, so I've heard this before. I can't verify this, but what I've heard is that companies actually put a specific amount of sugar, salt, whatever it is in their products in order to get you like addicted to the product. Just enough so that you'll want more, right? Whereas, because if they put less in, you're not going to be, your appetites aren't going to be as heightened, right? And so you're not going to want as much if they put less in, even though you'll still enjoy the product. Now that's pretty wicked stuff. Again, I can't verify that. I've heard that before. And it makes sense, right? Like there's a reason why you need a lot less sugar in a can of Coke and there's that much sugar in it. Okay, so this goes on all throughout the economy, right? Because there's this fallacy out there that says that if people aren't purchasing a lot of stuff, the economy is going to be really bad. Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, I think that's well, it's not a fallacy. I just think it's untrue, right? So, because the reason I think that's untrue is that it's like, no, nothing has changed, really. The only thing that's changed is people's demand for certain products. Oh, well, if we don't buy a bunch of Coke, then the Coke factory might shut down. Well, that's fine. We still have the same amount of ability to produce, right? We still have the same amount of ability to produce that same amount of ability. We can just focus that ability in a different direction, right? So instead of, making products that we don't need, purchasing products that we don't need, we can then purchase products that are going to improve our lives instead of, take our lives away from us. And so that is a lot of what the economy is focused on. And again, once you start getting, let's say if you really wanted to solve the environmental issue, what you could do is just ban advertising, right? You could just ban it. Do an outright ban on advertising. That's not to say that all advertising is bad, right? If you wanted to make advertising better, what you could do is get rid of music in ads. There's no reason for music to be in an ad, right? And you could also get rid of people in ads, unless it's for like clothing or something like that. But you're trying to get the ability to psychologically manipulate people down. And because again, people, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. What I've heard a lot is it's like, oh yeah, well, I mean, that doesn't work. Or, it doesn't really work on me type of thing. And I'm like, well, no, it does work on you. Or they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do this. They would not do this advertising. They would not spend millions and millions of dollars to advertise these companies every year. They wouldn't be spending the amount of money they spend if it didn't work, right? There's a reason they're spending that money. And to think that it somehow goes beyond you, that you're somehow immune, is just very arrogant. And you're probably one of the people it especially works on, right? Because the best type of manipulation is the manipulation you have no idea that it's happening, right? Think about the people who have like these emotional attachments to products. And I probably have a few of them myself, but think about this, it's like, oh, well, we're a Ford family, or we're a Coke family, that sort of stuff. Isn't that kind of weird? These are products, these are like products. People like pick teams when it comes to products. That isn't a good thing. This is not a good thing to have. And again, I'm not trying to judge you if you have that. I'm just saying it's not good, right? I'm not any better than you. I'm just saying this is not a good thing. We need to stop this in our culture. If we don't stop this, there's going to be serious problems. And I mean, there already are. We can say what we want, let's say, about the climate change thing. To me, that's just a secondary issue. I'm like, whatever the science is on climate change, we can talk about that. But let's first talk about the thing that if climate change does exist, that's causing the climate change. Because if we're just trying to, get rid of the symptoms without dealing with the actual disease, we're not doing anything, right? We're not going to solve the problem. A lot of this environmental stuff that's put out, these solutions that are put out, aren't actually going to solve any problems. there are certain things that we do need to do, right? For example, heat your home. If you live in a cold climate, you have to heat your home, and you're going to have to do that a certain way. So you can't cut the emissions that are used to heat your home. I mean, where I live, they brought in a carbon tax, and now people's heating bills are going up. Well, how is that helpful? That's not helpful. That's not helping anyone. That's only hurting people, right? That's hurting like the working class because they have to pay that bill, and now there's less money for them at the end of the month, right? So again, if we could do things like, I'm like, let's target the thing that's actually the issue. Let's stop providing cheap credit to people. Let's work on our financial system, because part of this has to do with financial system. That I think that's another story altogether. So again, I'm not for this, like, let's just make a goal when it comes to emissions, and get the emissions all down without thinking about the consequences, or thinking about, like, wait a minute, if we want to get the emissions down, like, what's causing this? What's causing this inflation? And this actually has to do with the way what you believe about God as well. Now, if you believe that the earth was created by God, and that it was created for humans by God, and that God gave Adam and Eve the command to have dominion over nature, right? Then you have to believe that if humanity, and he also told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. That's another command he gave to humanity, right? So if you believe that, then you can understand that it's not, if we do the right things, if we're living the right way, if we have the right things in place, things are going to be generally okay. We're not going to hit huge disasters. God didn't make this planet to be destroyed by humans when humans were just living the way they're supposed to live. No, it's when humans live the way they're not supposed to live that bad things start happening, that, we start having environmental destruction, right? I mean, you're going to have environmental destruction in certain ways and certain whatever, but that's just part of, the environment itself. There's this sort of cycle that goes on, right? So you want to build some homes, you're going to have to cut down some trees, right? So I think that's a way to look at it. And that's where because when I first started hearing about this environmental thing, I'm like, no, wait, we have it backwards here. It's God made us to have dominion over nature. And if we're living the right way, all problems are a spiritual problem. And if we're living the right way, things will be fine. The problems come in when we're living the wrong way. So if we want to deal with the problems, we have to live the right way, right? We have to deal with our mode of living. We're not going to do that unless a miracle of some sort occurs in the West. Now, I believe that I think there's going to be some miracles that happen. I believe that. I think we can turn this boat around. But just simply trying to get rid of emissions and stuff like that, and, go carbon neutral and think that our problems are going to be solved, or that somehow we're going to be safe, that is just not true at all. It is not true at all. You want to deal with the problems of the environment, you have to deal with the way in which people live. God will not be mocked. God will not be mocked. You think that trying to end emissions, trying to use all of this technology to solve your problems are going to solve your problems? Just you wait. People really think that if they just, we're just going to try to get rid of all of these emissions and then global warming won't happen. Just watch and wait. Yeah, because if God does exist as the Catholic Church teaches, and he does take an active role in humanity, you think that the symptom of your sin can be solved through technology? No, you cannot escape the symptom of your sins. That is not how it works. So let's say you get rid of all of the emissions. Perhaps God just decides to rain fire down from heaven. Perhaps that's just what he decides to do. God can do any of this stuff. He could solve the entire problem like that, right? So this sort of self-reliance, this idea that it's like, oh, we just need to put a carbon tax in place and all our problems will be okay. Meanwhile, we blaspheme God's name. We're not honoring the Sabbath. We're not doing any of these things. We have rampant degeneracy. And to think that we're somehow going to be okay after that, you think, again, do you think that God's going to be mocked? No, of course not. So again, if we want to solve some of these issues, like I said, hey, if you're an environmentalist, you should be with me on banning advertising because this would drop demand like that. It would drop the demand for useless products. But of course, a lot of people that are environmentalists don't actually care about any of this stuff, right? This is just a drum for them to beat. It's a false sense of spirituality. It's a false sense of righteousness, right? Because instead of trying to live their life correctly, now they replace what, the fervor for doing spiritual works with a fervor for doing environmental works. And, there's nothing wrong with taking care of the environment. Obviously, we should do that. We're stewards of the earth. We're to have dominion over nature, just as, you don't want to keep a messy room, right? Why would you want to keep a messy environment, right? Why would you want to pollute the environment? You don't want to pollute streams. You don't want to throw trash into the ocean. You don't want to be killing off a bunch of wildlife for no good reason. So yeah, that's just what I have to say about that. Hope that's all very clear, and hopefully I'll get another video done this week. Anyway, thanks for watching. God bless.